February 2nd, 1943. The guns finally go silent over the Volga, but the silence isn't peaceful. It's terrifying. It is broken only by the crunch of boots on frozen corpses and the pathetic whimpering of dying men. Out of the pulverized rubble of Stalingrad, a spectral army emerges. Look at them. This isn't the proud Wehrmacht that smashed through Poland and France. These aren't the invincible soldiers of the Blitzkrieg. These are ghosts wrapped in oily rags, women's scars, and stolen red army coats. Their eyes are sunken, hollowed out by months of starvation and terror. 91,000 of them. Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, holed up in the basement of the Univermag department store, has just surrendered the shattered remnants of the elite 6th Army to the Soviets. As these broken men shuffle forward, dropping their Carabiner 98K rifles into growing steel piles, many of them actually feel relief. They think the worst is over. They think the shooting has stopped. They think they might finally get a hot bowl of soup and a prisoner of war camp. They are wrong. Their nightmare is only just beginning. To understand why 91,000 men look like ghosts before they even enter captivity, you have to step inside the cage. They called it their Kessel, the Cauldron, and for 72 days, it was the most desperate place on earth. It starts not with a whimper, but with a seismic shock. November 19th, 1942. The Romanian flanks north and south of the city disintegrate under a hammer blow of Soviet armor. Operation Uranus. It is a masterpiece of military strategy, a steel noose snapping shut around the 6th Army. Within days, nearly 300,000 men, the flower of the German military, the conquerors of Paris and Kiev, are cut off inside the headquarters of the 6th Army. Panic begins to set in, though it is masked by professional stiff upper lips. General Friedrich Paulus, a man of staff maps and war games rather than blood and grit, stares at the situation boards. He requests permission to break out, to retreat, to save his army. But 4,000 kilometers away, in the warm, alpine air of the Wolf's Lair, Hitler says no. He declares Stalingrad a Festung, a fortress. He orders them to stand fast. He tells them they will be supplied by air. This is the great betrayal. Zoom in on the Potomac airfield in early December. This is the 6th Army's umbilical cord. It is a flat, windswept patch of frozen steppe that serves as the only link to the outside world. The men stand by the runway, heads tilted back, scanning the gray, leaden clouds, waiting for the drone of engines. Hermann Göring has promised 500 tons of supplies a day, fuel, ammunition, bread. But as the Junkers Jew 52 transports lumber out of mist, they don't bring salvation. They bring a cruel joke. On some days, the planes land with crates of condoms, spices, and old newspapers, bureaucratic errors from supply depots in Berlin that feel like a slap in the face to dying men. On other days, the weather is so foul that the daily tonnage drops to 10% of what is needed to sustain life. You can see the hope draining from the soldiers' faces as the realization hits. We are alone. By late December, the fortress has become a starvation camp. The daily bread ration is slashed to 200 grams, then 100, then 50. Imagine a slice of bread the size of a matchbox. That is fuel for a grown man fighting in temperatures that have plummeted to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Discipline begins to fracture along with the soldiers' minds. Visit the trenches near the factory district, the Red October plant. The glorious Wehrmacht is gone. In its place are scarecrows wrapped in stolen curtains and rags stripped from Soviet corpses. The distinct field gray uniforms are stained black with soot and oil. The hunger is a physical, gnawing beast. It changes men. When the field kitchens run dry, the horses go first. The majestic draft horses that pull the artillery are butchered, their meat frozen so hard it has to be chipped away with bayonets. When the horses are gone, the men turn to the frozen earth. They dig up potato peels discarded weeks ago. They boil leather belts and boot tongues, drinking the murky, tannin-rich water just to feel something warm in their stomachs. And then there is the lice. It sounds trivial compared to the Soviet T-34s tightening the ring, but the lice are torture all their own. With no water to wash and huddled together for warmth in crowded, subterranean bunkers, the infestation is total. Men scratch until they bleed. Typhus, carried by the lice, begins to sweep through the ranks. It starts with fever, then delirium. Men collapse in the snow, too weak to shiver, and simply never get up. Their bodies are stacked like cordwood outside the bunkers because the ground is too frozen to dig graves. Anchor your focus on Christmas Eve, 1942. This is the psychological breaking point. In a bunker near the Gumrak airfield, a young lieutenant, Kurt Royber, sketches a drawing on the back of a captured Soviet map using a piece of charcoal. It is the Stalingrad Madonna, a mother and child wrapped in a shawl. Around it, men are singing Silent Night, but their voices are cracked, harsh whispers. They are crying, not out of joy, but out of profound, crushing grief. They know that for thousands of them, this is the last Christmas. They write letters home, last wills and testaments disguised as holiday greetings, hoping one of the few departing planes will carry their final words to Germany. "We are quite alone," one soldier writes in a letter that will be captured by the Red Army. "Write to me no more." Outside the bunkers, the war does not stop for the holiday. The Soviet Katyusha rockets, Stalin's organs, scream to the freezing night, slamming into the shrinking pocket. The noise is constant, a grinding, thumping industrial rhythm of death. The perimeter is shrinking every hour. The airfields are falling one by one. By January, the Potomac airfield is overrun. The lifeline is cut. Now there is no way out. The wounded, who have been piling up by the thousands at the runway waiting for evacuation, are left behind to the mercy of the advancing Soviets. The screams of men realizing the last plane is left without them haunt the survivors for the rest of their short lives. General Paulus, now holed up in the basement of the Univermag department store in the city center, has physically deteriorated. He has an uncontrollable twitch in his left eye. He stopped shaving. The dysentery is rampant. The smell in the headquarters is a mixture of unwashed bodies, antiseptic, and fear. Hitler promotes Paulus to Field Marshal on January 30th. It is a cynical grimace of a promotion. No German Field Marshal has ever surrendered. Hitler is handing Paulus a pistol and expecting him to use it on himself. He wants a martyr, not a prisoner. But Paulus, staring at the ruin of his army, men who are now literally dropping dead from exhaustion while standing in line for water, cannot bring himself to do it. The fortress is a graveyard. The Sixth Army has cannibalized itself. The 91,000 men left standing are not an army. They are a tragedy. They have no ammo. They have no food. They have no hope. And as the Soviet soldiers kick down the doors of the Univermag, the silence that falls over the room is heavier than the shelling. The Battle of Stalingrad is over. The long, slow death of captivity is about to begin. February 2nd, 1943. The silence is the loudest thing anyone has ever heard. For 5 months, the air had been a solid wall of noise. The scream of Stuka bombers, the rattle of MG-42s, the crump of mortars. Now, as the last radio message flickers out from the tractor factory, the silence crashes down like a physical weight. Slowly, hesitantly, the steel doors of the cellars creak open. The men who emerge into the blinding white light of the Russian winter are blinking like moles dug up from the earth. They are filthy, bearded, and trembling. They raise their hands, not in a crisp military salute, but in the slow, agonizing motion of the defeated. The psychological shift in this exact second is shattering. 1 minute, you are a soldier of the Reich, a warrior bound by duty. The next, you are cattle. You have no rank. You have no rights. You are merely a number in a Soviet quota. The first interaction with the victors sets the tone for the horror to come. The Red Army soldiers who meet them aren't the propaganda caricatures the Germans were told to expect. They are hard, triumphant, and seething with a cold, righteous rage. They have seen what the Wehrmacht did to their villages. Now it is payday. Divide, divide. Move, move. The shouts ring out, punctuated by the prod of a bayonet. The shakedown begins immediately. It happens right there in the snow, amidst the ruins of the city they destroyed. The Soviet soldiers move down the lines of shivering prisoners, their eyes scanning for loot. Urine, come. Watches, come. A wrist is grabbed. A watch is ripped off, taking skin with it. Wedding rings are yanked from frostbitten fingers. But the most coveted items aren't gold or silver. They are wool and leather. Zoom in on a young private. Let's call him Hans. He is 19. He is wearing a heavy Wehrmacht greatcoat he scavenged from a dead officer weeks ago. It is the only thing keeping his blood from freezing. A Soviet submachine gunner steps in front of him, the barrel of his PPSH-41 tapping Hans's chest. He doesn't speak German, but the gesture is universal. Take it off. Hans hesitates. To lose the coat is a death sentence. He looks in the guard's eyes and sees zero empathy. The bolt of the submachine gun clacks back. Trembling, fingers clumsy with cold, Hans unbuttons the coat. The heat of his body escapes in a cloud of steam as the coat is ripped away. He is left standing in the minus 30-degree wind in a thin tunic, the cold instantly biting into his marrow. He has survived the battle, but the clock on his life has just sped up drastically. Then the march begins. The destination is Beketovka, a collection point just south of the city. It is only a few dozen kilometers away, a distance a healthy man could walk in an afternoon. But for these walking skeletons, it is a marathon through hell. The column stretches for miles, a gray snake of misery, winding through the white steppe. The pace is brutal. The Soviet guards, riding on ponies or in American-made Studebaker trucks alongside the column, have strict orders. No stopping, no lagging. This is where the reality of the death march sets in. Focus on the mechanics of walking in that condition. Your boots are falling apart. Maybe you have rags wrapped around your feet. The snow is knee-deep, concealing shell craters and ice patches. Every step requires a monumental effort of will. Your body has cannibalized its own muscle for energy weeks ago. You are lifting bone, not flesh. The man in front of you stumbles. He is a veteran sergeant, a man who survived France and the drive to the Volga. He falls to his knees, gasping, clutching his chest. "Comrade, help me," he wheezes to the man next to him. But the man next to him keeps walking. He has to. To stop is to die. A guard trotting behind sees the gap in the line. He doesn't shout. He doesn't offer a hand. He unslings his rifle, a Mosin-Nagant with a long, needle-like bayonet. He walks up to the kneeling sergeant. The report of the rifle is flat and dull in the heavy, frozen air. The sergeant slumps forward, face down into the snow. The guard cycles a bolt, ejecting the brass casing, and trots back to his position. The column does not pause. They step around the body, then over it. Within 20 minutes, the body is stripped of its boots by the prisoners at the rear of the column, desperate for anything to cover their own blackened, rotting toes. This scene repeats itself 100 times an hour. Mile after mile, the road to Beketovka becomes paved with the bodies of those whose strength gave out just moments too soon. As the sun begins to set, the temperature plummets further. The steppe wind, the boran, picks up, whipping ice crystals into the prisoners' faces. It scours the skin like sandpaper. Eyelashes freeze shut. The mucus in their noses turns to ice. The Highwis, the Hilfswillage, Russian volunteers who had served the Wehrmacht as drivers and laborers, face the worst fate. If the guards identify them, there is no march. They are pulled out of line, forced into a ditch, and mowed down immediately. The sound of these mass executions drifts over the column, a grim reminder to the Germans of the hatred surrounding them. Night falls, but there is no shelter. The column is halted in the middle of the open steppe. "Stop. Lie down." The order is passed down. There are no tents. No fires are allowed. The men must sleep on the naked ice. This creates a grotesque struggle for survival. The prisoners instinctively form human piles. They stack themselves like rugby scrums, bodies pressed tight against bodies, try and share the last vestiges of animal heat. The men in the center of the pile survive. The men on the outside, exposed to the wind, freeze to death. Imagine being in that pile. You are pressed against the lice-ridden wool of a stranger. You can smell the sour stench of dysentery, unwashed bodies, and gangrene, the sickly sweet smell of rotting flesh. You can hear the man next to you shivering violently, his teeth chattering like a machine gun, until the shivering suddenly stops. You know he's gone, but you don't move. You hug his cooling corpse because it is still serving as a windbreak. When the guards shout Davai, at dawn the piles uncoil. But the ground is covered in mounds of gray lumps that do not move. The survivors stand up, their joints creaking, shaking the snow from their shoulders. They look at the friends they slept next to, now frozen hard as stone, their eyes open and staring at the gray sky. They leave them there. They have to. By the time the ragged remnants of the column crest the final ridge and see the barbed wire fences of Beketovka, thousands have already perished. They look down at the camp. A vast, flat expanse of snow with almost no buildings, just thousands of holes dug in the ground. They thought the surrender was the end of the war. They thought the march was the worst of it. But as they are herded through the gates, greeted by the sight of mountains of corpses stacked near the latrines, the terrifying truth settles in. The battle of bullets is over. The battle for bread and breath has just begun. If the march was purgatory, Beketovka is the ninth circle of hell. The survivors stumble through the gates, expecting barracks, bunks, maybe a stove. What they find is a moonscape of misery. There are no buildings. There is only the steppe, the wind, and 80,000 men crammed into a space the size of a few football fields. The only shelter is the earth itself. Men use mess tins, helmets, and their own frostbitten hands to claw holes in the frozen clay. They create foxholes for 4 or 5 men. They crawl inside, pulling a piece of canvas or a dead man's coat over the entrance. Inside these holes, the ecosystem is primal, zooming on the daily ritual of the soup. This is the only thing that matters. Time is no longer measured in hours, but in the distance to the field kitchen, a young Austrian soldier stands in line. He has been waiting for 6 hours. He holds a rusty tin can, his most precious possession. If he loses it, he starves. The soup is basically hot water with a few grains of millet or, if he is lucky, a fish head staring back at him. As he reaches the front, the ladle dips. The Soviet cook, exhausted and indifferent, splashes a gray liquid into the tin. It spills over the soldier's trembling fingers. He doesn't wipe it off. He licks the scalding liquid from his dirty skin, desperate for every calorie. Behind him, a scuffle breaks out. A man has collapsed. He isn't helped up. He is trampled. The line compresses. The gap he left is filled instantly. Empathy has been starved out of them. But hunger is a slow killer. Typhus is a sprinter. By March 1943, the spring thaw turns the camp into a swamp of feces and mud. The lice population explodes. They are everywhere, in the seams of the uniforms, in the beards, in the eyebrows. They move like a shimmering gray carpet across the sleeping men. Enter the hospital barrack, a misnomer. It is a death house. Dr. Hans Dibbled, a German physician captured with the army, walks through the ward. There are no medicines, no bandages, no anesthetics. He steps over bodies packed so tightly that he cannot see the floor. He stops at a young lieutenant. The man is delirious, his skin burning with a 40-degree fever. He is clawing at his chest, tearing his skin raw. The typhus rash, red, angry spots, covers his torso. The doctor can do nothing but offer a sip of water. He watches as the lieutenant's breathing changes, the death rattle bubbling in his throat. Then, the terrifying realization. The man next to the dying lieutenant is eating a piece of bread he hid in his tunic. He is chewing rhythmically, staring blankly at the wall, while his comrade dies 3 inches from his face. The psychological barrier between life and death has dissolved completely. The dead are just furniture, but the Soviets need these men. They need labor to rebuild a Russia they destroyed. And so, the order comes down, move them east. This initiates the most horrific chapter of the entire Stalingrad saga, the transport trains. The men are marched to the railhead. Waiting for them are not passenger cars, but cattle wagons, teplushkas, wooden boxes designed for 8 horses or 40 men. The guards shove them in. Room for more. Push, rifle but slam into backs. 60 men, 70, 80, 100. They are packed so tight they cannot sit. They have to stand, pressed chest to back, a solid block of humanity. Then, the heavy iron sliding door rumbles shut. Clang. The darkness is total. The sound of the latch barring the door from the outside echoes like a gunshot. A single sliver of light cuts through a crack in the wood. The train jerks forward. The journey to the gulags has begun. It will not take hours. It will take weeks. Inside the wagon, the temperature rises. The body heat of 100 men turns the car into a sauna, then a suffocating oven. The air grows thick with carbon dioxide. Then comes the thirst. It is a madness. Men begin to hallucinate. They lick the iron bolts of the carriage walls, hoping for condensation. They suck on the wool of their collars to generate saliva. And then the dysentery strikes. There is one bucket in the corner. For 100 men, it overflows within the first hour. The floor becomes slick with filth. Men lose control of their bowels where they stand. They cannot move to the bucket. They simply soil themselves, and the men press against them. The stench is chemical, burning the lungs. Days pass. The train stops occasionally, but the doors rarely open. When they do, it is only for a moment. Dead out, bread in. The routine is gruesome. The men who have died from suffocation, thirst, or typhus are still standing, held upright by the crush of the living. When the door opens, the pressure releases. The dead tumble out onto the tracks like mannequins. The survivors, wild-eyed and feral, push the bodies out not out of respect, but to make space, to sit down. Zoom in on one specific wagon, number 722. It has been rolling for 18 days towards Tashkent. Inside, the hierarchy of strength has taken over. The strong have fought their way to the tiny ventilation slit near the roof to breathe fresh air. The weak have been pushed to the floor. A young soldier, barely 18, is trapped at the bottom of the pile. He can feel the boots of his comrades on his back. He tries to scream, but his throat is too dry. He listens to the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of the wheels on the tracks. It's a hypnotic lullaby. He feels the vibration of the train through the floorboards against his cheek. He isn't thinking about the Führer or the Reich or victory. He is thinking about a glass of apple juice his mother gave him 3 years ago. The memory is so vivid he can taste the sweetness. The train slows. The vibration stops. He hears the heavy boots of the NKVD guards on the gravel outside. The latch is thrown. The door slides open. Light floods in, but the boy doesn't move. The guards peer into the gloom. A cloud of steam and the stench of death billows out. "Davai!" the guard shouts. Nothing happens. Of the 100 men loaded into wagon 722, only 12 stumble out into the sunlight. They look like monsters covered in filth, eyes bulging, skeletal. They fall to their knees and eat the snow by the tracks. Inside the car, 88 bodies remain, a silent, tangled sculpture of agony. This scene is repeated at train stations across the Soviet Union. From the Urals to Siberia, the 6th Army is being scattered like ashes across the continent. The 91,000 have become a statistic. The survivors are no longer soldiers. They are slaves, and their war is far from over. May 8th, 1945. The guns of Europe finally cool down. In London, Paris, and New York, confetti rains from the sky. Sailors kiss nurses in Times Square. The Third Reich has been crushed into dust. The nightmare is over. But in the lead mines of the Urals, deep under the frozen earth, the nightmare has simply changed shifts. For the survivors of Stalingrad, Victory Day is just another Tuesday. There is no confetti here. There is only the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of pickaxes hitting stone and the rasping coughs of men whose lungs are slowly filling with silicate dust. When the news finally trickles down into the slave labor camps, whispered by guards or scratched onto latrine walls, that Hitler is dead and Berlin has fallen, there is no cheering. The men are too hollowed out to cheer. They simply look at each other with dead eyes, wondering, does this mean we go home? The answer is a brutal silence that lasts for 10 years. This is a lost decade. While Western Europe rebuilds, while the Volkswagen Beetle starts rolling off assembly lines and rock and roll begins to play on the radio, the men of the 6th Army are frozen in time. They are no longer soldiers. They are biological machines used to rebuild the Soviet Union. Zoom in on a camp near Vorkuta, north of the Arctic Circle. It is 1949. For years after the war ended, a former Panzer Grenadier, let's call him Eric, is logging timber. He is 26 years old, but he looks 60. His teeth are gone, lost to scurvy. His spine is permanently curved from carrying logs through snowdrifts. He has forgotten what a woman looks like. He has forgotten the taste of butter. His entire universe is the barbed wire perimeter, the biting cold, and the daily quota. The Soviets have reclassified these men. They aren't just prisoners of war anymore. Many are branded as war criminals on flimsy charges, sentenced to 25 years of hard labor. It is a legal trick to keep their slave force indefinitely. Eric watches his friends die, one by one. They don't die from bullets anymore. They die from giving up. The Russians call them dokodaiga, goners. It's a specific look. A man stops washing. He stops trading his tobacco ration for extra bread. He sits on his bunk, staring at a specific knot in the wood. And within 3 days, he is dead. His heart just stops beating out of sheer lack of will. The years grind on. 1951, 1953. Stalin dies. The Gulag regime softens slightly, but the gates remain locked. It takes a politician to do what an army couldn't. September 1955. West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer travels to Moscow. The old fox, as they call him, sits across from the Soviet leadership in a smoke-filled room in the Kremlin. The atmosphere is icy. The Soviets hate the Germans. The Germans fear the Soviets. But Adenauer plays a high-stakes game of poker. He agrees to establish diplomatic relations, but he has one non-negotiable condition. Give me my men back. The deal is struck. Cut to October 7, 1955. The Friedland transit camp in West Germany. The atmosphere is electric, heavy with a suffocating anxiety. Thousands of women, mothers, wives, daughters, have gathered at the station. They are holding placards, photos of smiling young men in crisp 1941 uniforms, photos that are now 14 years old. Listen to the sound of the steam whistle. A train pulls in, the brakes screeching. This is the transporter returned. The doors open. But the men who step off are not the men in the photos. These are broken, gray figures. They walk with shuffles, wearing ill-fitting Russian peasant clothes or old, dyed Wehrmacht tunics. They are thin, their skin like parchment paper. They blink at the colors, the noise, the sheer life of a free Germany they no longer recognize. The crowd surges forward, and then the screaming starts. It is a chaotic mix of joy and devastation. A woman spots a face she recognizes. She screams a name. A man drops his bag and falls into her arms, weeping uncontrollably. But for every reunion, there is a tragedy. Zoom in on a woman named Helga. She is holding a picture of her husband, Karl. She pushes through the crowd, shoving the photo into the faces of the returning men. Have you seen him? Karl Muller? 6th Army, 24th Panzer Division. The men shake their heads. They look away. They can't look her in the eye. They know. They probably saw Karl die in a foxhole in Beketovka or freeze to death on a cattle train to Siberia. But they can't say it. Finally, one old soldier stops. He looks at the photo, then at Helga. He gently touches her arm. He doesn't say a word. He just shakes his head slowly, his eyes filling with tears. Helga drops the hand, holding the photo. The picture flutters to the platform floor, landing face up in the dust. The hope that sustained her for 13 years evaporates in a single second. And what of the architect of this misery? Field Marshal Paulus, the man who surrendered them. He didn't work in the mines. He didn't starve in a cattle car. He lived in a comfortable dacha in Moscow, then a villa in East Germany, working as a trophy for the communist regime. He died in his bed in Dresden in 1957, just 2 years after his men came home. He never looked them in the eye. So, let's look at the final ledger. The butcher's bill. 91,000 men walked into captivity in the ruins of Stalingrad in February 1943. When the last train left Friedland in 1955, only 6,000 remained. 85,000 men vanish, swallowed by the vast, indifferent silence of the East. If you go to Volgograd today, the former Stalingrad, you will see the massive statue of the motherland calls. It is a glorious, towering monument to Soviet victory. But if you walk out into the steppe, into the quiet fields where the wind still howls like a wolf, there are no monuments for the 6th Army. There are only bones, millions of fragments of bone, slowly sinking deeper into the black earth with every winter thaw. They are the silent witnesses to the greatest military disaster in history. They marched in as conquerors. They surrendered as captives. And they remained as dust. That is the legacy of Stalingrad. Not the medals, not the speeches, not the maps. Just the wind, blowing over the graves of 91,000 ghosts who never made it home. The steppe doesn't give up its secrets easily, and neither do we. If you want to keep exploring the gritty, unfiltered reality of World War II that the textbooks often leave out, hit that subscribe button. We are digging up news stories from the front lines every day. I'll see you in the next one.